Welcome to Technically Speaking, conversations for design managers delivering real stories and ready-to-use tactics to help you build confidence and credibility. I sit down with top voices in design, tech, and business to open the black box of leadership. I'm your host, Harrison Wheeler. With 20 years in design and a decade leading teams from scrappy startups to global giants, it's time to get technical. Hey everybody, thanks for tapping in and listening. My name is Harrison Wheeler, and welcome to Technically Speaking. In this limited podcast series, we'll explore the untold stories of AI product development, the go-to-market strategies that actually work, the personal projects that evolve into powerful tools, and unique challenges of designing for AI-driven experiences. Today, we're getting technical with Filip Skrzesinski, co-founder of Subframe, about the challenges, triumphs, and unexpected turns of building in the AI space. Subframe coins itself as the UI design tool for the AI era, a visual editor that seamlessly syncs with code, intuitive drag and drop, responsive design, and control over every detail, pixel perfect every time. Filip has been working on AI tooling products for more than half a decade, from virtual reception software, relationships intelligence, to now bridging the gap between design and code. It's almost been described as lovable in Figma, as if they had a baby. I'm excited to learn how it's like to be a design leader, creating tools for designers, and what the competitive edge it has on others in the market. Most importantly, for you all, the listeners, we want to give you some insight and motivations to take the leap and start using it. Filip, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Harrison. It's great to be here.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm really excited to have you on as a guest. I was telling Filip about the nuance and the different types of conversations we're having about, AI tooling on the market. When I was thinking about starting the show or the series, it was really hearing from designers in different sort of companies at different stages. What are the things that they were interested about learning when it comes to this? And so Subframe was something that came top of mind for some folks, because when we think about the design process, one of the biggest things, at least the experiences that I've had, is like when we start talking about craft, right? Craft isn't necessarily just about designing things well in Figma, but it's also about actually shipping the thing, right? And what it looks like in production code. And so that's why I'm really excited about this. I have my own sort of interest of like, how can teams actually improve the outlook? So, I'd really want to understand, what has your journey been like to maybe get you to this point of starting a project like Subframe?
Yeah, thanks, Harrison. It's exactly right. I think for so long, designers have sat kind of in the middle between people like PMs or engineers.
Yeah.
And working on creating mockups, right? And it's in the word, mockups, right? It's not real. And so we've really been taking this role of communicators, right? To really do all the stuff we do well, of distilling problems and really envisioning the future. Design is how stuck at just having to communicate that to someone who can build it for us. So a little bit about my background and sort of naturally how I got here. I'm a designer first. I wear that hat. I've mostly worked at hats that you have to, just like today at Subframe. But one of the things that I studied was computer science and also art. So design kind of fell in the middle. Having that technical background, learning esoteric programming languages and data structures, like these aren't things that are necessarily helpful to my day-to-day now, but they really taught that foundation of how engineering works. And at the end of the day, that software is built with code. And I've always been, throughout my journey, trying to get closer to that material, right? Like if the code is the brain, we're visual thinkers. We care about those details and our border radiuses, of course. But how do we get closer to that code? And that's really where, the vision of Subframe came from. This is before AI kind of really made a splash on the scene. I almost like to think that we built like probably the last like design tool before AI, right? Because everything now, of course, you're starting with large language models. Of course, you're starting with prompts and chat. But we built the sort of not design to code, because that
Yeah.
makes me also think of, the plugins that we've had for years, um, that tried to take something in a different medium and translate it into code, but really design with code.
Yeah.
And it's a funny arc when you think back of, WYSIWYG editors and Dreamweaver and like all this history of
Yeah.
design tooling. It's kind of the circling back
Yeah.
to, hey, let's not be stuck in, you know, file like formats essentially, right? We went from PSD to Sketch to .fig. Um, let's actually work with the material, and that's code. And so really Subframe, it was birthed from just being able to have code that you can visually manipulate to design interfaces with.
Or is this something that was sort of brewing in your head and, it just felt right?
Yeah, the origin story is really, I've been really lucky that I got to meet one of my co-founders, Irvin, who Subframe is really his baby. He is one of the most, goated front end engineers with a design mind. Kind of every designer has that like front end engineer they've worked with that just like
Yeah.
instantly gets it, right?
Yep.
And he started working on Subframe a few years ago and really building it through that passion of, wow, working on design systems, working on no code tools, and being like, what if we just break that, right? What if we could just take React components and drag them around just like we do in the browser and have that generate code on the fly, right?
Yeah.
So no AI there. And yeah, I got to meet him through a coworker, and it was like kismet, if you locked me up in a room and said work on what you want to work, and he did the same thing, it's like we converged and we're thinking about the same problem. And so we took that initial version that he started working with and also brought on another co-founder engineer, and that really is where we started to iterate and bring it to market and bring it to the not final product to what it is today.
Yeah. How would you say your design approach sort of changed how that product, came to market versus from that initial concept that you had?
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey. Part of it is actually around, less so even the design, but even just who we're
Mhm.
building it for.
Yeah.
So the interesting story with Subframe is, when we launched last year and we're kind of gearing up to that, it's been about a year since we officially came onto the market.
Yeah.
We weren't targeting designers at all.
Mm-mm.
So we were building a design tool ultimately, because again, this is also before AI, before you could
Right.
start to chat your way into it.
Yeah.
But it was really because, we were kind of taking a page from really that uh, founders led growth, startup playbook, where we're tapped into the community here in San Francisco, where you could walk into any coffee shop and I'm sure someone is building something.
Yeah.
And so things like, Y Combinator, a lot of these accelerators, a lot of just technical founders who were, hey, I don't know design. I don't want to write any front end, but I'm building something literally this week, right? That first MVP. And we
Mm.
kind of fit that bill because what we did was build out a lot of these interesting layers of, I guess it's kind of an abstraction where um, the balance in design is really between full freedom and constraint,
Yeah.
right? And on
Yeah.
one end, you have, I mean, you could take the just brush stroke, you could take the like, you can do anything. You can, go into a tool like Figma and draw anything. On the other end, we have full design systems that are built out, token systems, right? Colors, typography, everything has sort of a rule or a guardrail built in, and you're kind of just putting together the pieces. So we started Subframe with, there's always this level of full control, but at least on the user experience front at the beginning, we tried to package it up in a way that did feel kind of, again, that feeling of friendly defaults,
Yeah.
right? That's small things like when you have our control for padding. Yes, you could select any, pixel value for padding on any side. but our default is just a control that says extra small, small, medium, large t-shirt sizing,
Yeah.
right? And it starts to make getting to that initial version a little bit faster. And, sometimes those constraints are good for creativity. But in our case, it was really to just make it easier to build interfaces where we're like, these are friendly defaults that start to bake in good principles of design from the get-go. And
Yeah.
that really helped non-designers. And, eventually now there's a whole different set of features and way of designing for designers since we've been going down that rabbit hole. But
Yeah.
that's really where we started with a little bit of constraint.
Yeah. So one of the things you kind of talk about, maybe what I'm hearing is a slight pivot in the product that you went to market with. How does your target segment change? I guess what I'm trying to get to is part of it was, hey, founders wanted to ship something that's functioning as soon
Mhm.
as possible, or at least with the least amount of effort as possible. You've got two engineering co-founders. Where do you see this dynamic? What's the balance? Is this a tool that you feel both engineers and designers can use, or are we slanting more towards, hey, look, designers can actually, or maybe non-technical people for that matter, this is for them. And perhaps we don't need the engineering portion anymore because maybe you're baking that into the product.
Yeah, it's a great question. One of our most existential questions at this early stage company of who's
Yeah.
your ICP, right?
Yeah.
Who's your ideal customer? Um, I think what's happening is, the world is moving towards a place where truly anyone can be a builder of
Mm,
software.
right.
I think a lot of these roles are starting to get blurred.
Yeah.
Um, the way I like to think about, especially now, going forward, is Subframe is first and foremost not quite a design tool, because to me, design tools mean they produce these like artifacts, right? These little separate things that aren't quote unquote the real thing you're building.
Yeah.
I like to think of us as we are a visual way to build software.
Mm,
Because the underpinning is always code and software is made of code, where it starts to get interesting is these lines of, there's a bit of a mapping between roles and the medium that you're working with. If everything is code, well, then your engineers are probably in a text editor, right? Looking at interacting with the code directly. And of course, there's AI features, things like Cursor and Windsurf that let you, you know, supercharge your workflow or autocomplete inside the editor, but your medium is still code, which is
right.
text.
Yeah.
On the other side, you have the non-technical people whose now medium towards working with code. Before it was nothing. Before it was talking to an engineer, right? Now
Mm,
it's talking to a large language model who can do that layer of translation. So a lot of these tools on the market, the AI code builders, they're also used to build software, but the medium is chat, right?
yeah.
It's text, it's conversation, it's translating your high level ideas. And that to us created this gap in the middle of
Mm,
it. It's mostly designers, but it's not just designers. It's people who think visually to build software, right? It's I want to see it. I want to envision what it looks like, what
yeah.
the interactions are like, what the flows are like. I want to move stuff around. If you care about that visual layer, then Subframe is basically the tool to help you build software that way. And that's where we really see it as becoming that place for collaboration
Yeah.
where designers can set up a system, PMs can prompt their way because we do have AI design features now where you could upload screenshots, you could prompt, and we will create designs for you. Then the designer can go back and make all their tweaks because that visual layer of editing, that actual, like, I can move this button to the left, I don't have to chat. Can you
Yeah.
move this button to the left? Or I don't have to go into code and find the right div and copy and paste that. Um,
Mm,
you just want to move it to the left, right? And so we let
yeah.
you, and I think what the true collaboration becomes like is that as long as it's code underneath, then you're all just building
Right.
this thing. and you're just working on the right piece at the right time that you're the best at, but ultimately you're building software,
Mhm.
and and that's kind of where we fit in.
Yeah, I really like the clarity of thinking there. Um, because I think like at its core, I was doing a talk on this. And it's really fascinating when you take a step back and you think about how like product development organizations generally work. So many things are built around a process and perhaps maybe some of the constraints of, you know, maybe a specific role type, hierarchies, frameworks, if you will, like agile type processes, right? And you know, at its core, most people are trying to build a product that people can use, and these things tend to get in the way.
Mm,
And I can just, you know, one of the things that I love hearing from you is instead of needing to go through these conduits every single time, like I can think of conversations in the past of like, if we wanted to move a button around, it would be like put in a ticket, we'll put it on our backlog. Uh, you know, it's going to take us like 2 sprints, and you know, in my head, I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is so inefficient. Um, and so I guess like with that being said, if you think about the product development life cycle today, um, it's pretty standard in terms of how people describe it, right? It's like, you know, research,
mm,
conceptualize, you know, maybe prototype. Companies might do that.
mm.
Uh, you know, they might do a build and then they'll ship it and then rinse and repeat. Like, where do you see that transforming? And do you see this as like a new role, or is this like an extension of roles that are existing?
Yeah, great question. I think the biggest issue right now is when you had to add the qualifier of maybe prototyping.
Mm,
I think prototyping has been an interesting. It's a little bit of a loaded term, or at least people have different perceptions of it. People see it as, oh yeah, everything's a prototype. Other
yeah.
people see it as, why would we spend this time making this extra thing? But to me, I think when you start to actually just move through that process of building up software through various levels of fidelity and craft, whether again it's designer coming in to focus on visuals interactions, or it's the PM who's actually like, hey, this, information architect, this problem that we're talking about here is kind of not right. It's not solving it, right? Um, I think a prototype truly becomes like just part of that journey. And we should see this almost as, again, if we're creating a sculpture out of clay, code is our clay now, right?
Mm,
It's not that a designer only works in paper and a PM only draws the brief, and then it's only the engineer who goes in with the tools to sculpt. We're all sculpting now. And I think that changes a little bit of the definition of like everything's sort of a prototype,
yeah.
right? Throughout that journey until you ship it. The biggest thing for me is that those things that help us validate if we're on the right path are just being compressed, not to having to have this trade-off of, do we really spend more time research and testing and building a prototype, or do we ship this version and then iterate on it?
Mm,
All of that is being condensed where you could just truly really interact with the real thing. Like,
yeah.
I've been a huge fan of I used to even prototype like in a lot of actually what I always wanted, Subframe to be is like I used to make prototypes in Webflow for
Yeah.
actual code design because I
Yeah.
was like, I need to actually like see what it's like to see different data, or
Yeah.
actually be able to add an item to a list and test out a flow that isn't just, and the
Right.
user kind of goes through this happy path.
Yeah.
uh, and I think that's kind of part of it is not
Yeah.
only are we all building the thing, but we're all becoming kind of our own users of it too.
Yeah.
And I think that's always been a huge, dog fooding is great. We build Subframe in Subframe, so we know it quite well.
Yeah.
Uh, but in general, like I think you are your kind of best user too, and you actually testing the thing and not having to imagine, oh, what I hope that's going to feel right when we actually go through this flow. And then, you go back and then you actually ship it. You see a user test of people clicking like the exact button you didn't think they were going to click, right? Or go a completely roundabout way. I think all of that is being flattened so that we're truly like experiencing and building and prototyping as we go and iterate.
I love that. Yeah. Yeah. The example with the Webflow totally resonates with me. So I just found it like, it's amazing that number one, I don't really have to deal with code, but because of my background, doing that type of work and designing, much quicker way to bring things to, something that people could use. But even on the back end, just simply plugging in like an Airtable or some integration to make it feel real. But obviously there's just so much limitations in something like Webflow. So, obviously building, an app requires a different line of tooling and thinking. I guess like for me, if you were to say, hey, look, we've got all these tools on the market, right? Like what's the advantage here? So what is the gap that feels, right? I might be using, like you said, like different tools like Replit, Bolt. I might be having like a Figma in my stack. What's really kind of like the value prop in terms of like the standout piece,
Mm.
in terms of where people can get started with Subframe?
Yeah. The way we're going is a lot of tools, are great for, speaking of prototyping, maybe creating a prototype really
Yeah.
quickly to the side. What we're trying to do is almost embody everything that makes your product,
Yeah.
everything that makes your design, your design. And what that means is things like starting with design system and components. This is when you go into Subframe, we give you a design system that you could completely tweak and edit, like you Figma, except it's a full React component library.
Yeah.
Or maybe you're working with an existing system. We could import those components as well. And all of a sudden, there's no more, is this the right button? It's just the button from code that you can start designing with. Similarly, I think that context, that's kind of a lot of the inputs where if you have design system documentation, we can ingest that in, right? And start to personalize what Subframe knows about what you're building really well, the same way product manager knows, right? And that actually helps sort of train the AI to start to follow those patterns, right? They might be copywriting guidelines. They might be, hey, always make a secondary button to the left of the primary button. And all of that is using your system as well. So the inputs matter a lot, I think.
Yeah.
And the closer people can get to what they're working with today is sort of the main, that kind of context and is really a differentiating factor, because that also then leads into the outputs where that code being generated, right? It has to be something that your developer would actually look at and say, wow, this follows our conventions. It's really where a lot of Subframe, going back to like our pre-AI story, I think is our advantage, because we didn't ask AI to generate code for us. We just figured out how to generate code the same way my engineer co-founder would write it himself. And that's really exciting for, the same way designers really want flexibility, developers want that as well, and be able to take that code and integrate it in its code base. So those are really the inputs and outputs that make Subframe really fit into real workflows on real teams, including bigger teams, right? That have a whole design system language, that have all these patterns mapped out. That middle part is basically where we want to, that's the playground. That's where you can move stuff around. You can use AI to generate ideas. You can ask it to, hey, it's going to by default follow your patterns, or you could sometimes bully it to think of really creative new things. It's creating that kind of, again, whether it's a canvas or just exploratory or building the pieces experience that, especially designers really love. It's just all the pieces already fit in. It's
Got it.
never wasted work, right? It's always building up that final product.
Yeah. Okay. So let me maybe recite this in my head and let me know if I'm wrong or not. But maybe the happy path or the ideal path here is, let's say, we've been working really hard on our design system. We've got all the documentations, we've got all the specs. You're saying that Subframe basically can ingest all of that. Let's say we had to try to build a new surface. We'll call that surface a dashboard for all intents purposes.
Yep.
I could essentially go into Subframe, maybe type a prompt out in terms of what I'm looking for. And essentially, it could give me an output that aligns to the design systems, maybe patterns, data visualizations, colors, layout, etc. And in minutes, we could have something that is built from code. Is that sort of like what I'm picking up? And is that what you're building toward, or is that something that you've seen
Oh,
some success with today?
yeah, that's where we are today. Importing your components, we're kind of doing that for larger teams right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yes, bringing that in and, then, yeah, you get that result. We also give you multiple AI generations. That's kind of
Mm.
the difference.
Wow.
We
Yeah.
want you to be like, we want you to feel like you're in the driver's seat,
Mm.
right? I don't, the kind of slot machine of type something, wait, get one thing back, right?
Yeah.
that's that doesn't create a sense of flow for me who likes to
Yeah.
explore ideas.
Yeah.
So we, for example, give you, right now up to 4 AI generations of that dashboard. And then not only is it great, I have to just pick the one I like and thanks AI, like you did quote unquote my job. No, that's just where your job starts, right? Going back to craft and taste. We will live in a world where there is an infinite amount of things that can be generated at any given. So one of the things we're doing is generating, these multiple generations, and it really becomes your job as a designer to curate and remix the things that really matter.
Mm.
So it's as simple as building interactions where you can just go and drag over maybe just the header that you like from one of the generations, and then maybe you like one of the cards from the other, and then maybe you like the sidebar from the other, and you're actually starting to really be in that creative control of
Mm.
still AI helping you generate ideas, but you are always the one putting them back together, towards that vision you're building.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious. So you've got me sold on this. Um, maybe kind of give us like what are some sort of examples of how teams in the real world have been like integrating Subframe into their workflow? Are there any examples or shining moments that you've seen so far?
Yeah. I think one of the obvious one is that we designed Subframe in Subframe.
Yeah.
So truly, while maybe we started with, or it's easy to get your basic SaaS dashboards and things like that out.
Yeah.
Building a design tool inside of a design tool, it's built in code. Sometimes it's a little bit of an inception moment, but I think that's a really cool part to be able to prototype things that truly I just couldn't do anywhere else.
Yeah.
But in terms of, yeah, where what people have been doing, I think, one of the most exciting things is just to see this renaissance of designers again getting closer to code, experimenting with building things themselves, having that aha moment.
Mm.
And that could be, side projects or really personal things, people building like their own personal CRM, right? That they could just use for themselves. And suddenly as a designer, you were just able to do that. Um, where it gets exciting is, a lot of early stage companies similar to us, they have moved completely onto Subframe as
Wow.
their sort of tool of choice. Things like Figma are like your pen and paper digital equivalent.
Wow.
But as soon as you're ready to build, like your button, right, all your components are there, all your product context is there. Everything that you do is code that your developer can take. It really starts to, again, just flatten that. Like have those aha moments where I could just go in and mock this thing up and go and make a PR after that. But I think the coolest part is we're just scratching the surface. One of the things we're doing is, a lot of these interactions and what we call prototyping the product actually,
Yeah.
because it's still getting into the real thing is, connecting flows and building these interactive things, maybe with just mock data inside of Subframe. But the coolest example I recently saw, and we're really exploring into how can we like create an experience around this, is building your own mini design tools.
Mm.
So maybe it's a quick little thing to help you generate animation, right? Or like a cool gradient pattern. Maybe it's you're working on a card, component, and you want to see what that card looks like if there's a lot of text, if there's not a lot of text, if there's a bunch of badges added, if there isn't, if there's a chat with 20 things, if there isn't. Um, in the past, what do we have to do? We have to kind of almost like snapshots of a video frame, just be
Yeah.
like, this is what it looks like here. This is what it looks like here. This is what it looks like here. And kind of just squint and be like, that'll probably feel right. In Subframe, you could build your component, and that's again the real thing.
Yeah.
But you can almost kind of do this meta level of abstraction where, okay, but what if I at the top drag in a slider and label it length of text? What if I drag in another slider and label it number of chat messages? And then Subframe can actually connect those things together, again, inside of Subframe, where you could render that component and you could just be like, what does it look like when there's nothing there? And it's an empty state. What does it look like when there's a ton of things there? Right. And you're building your own little like design tool for each component to stress test that component. That really blew my mind recently when people started doing things like that. And I think that's really one of the more exciting, like out of the box thinking for what designers can do and how software can be built in a way that truly like, you can interact with.
Yeah. 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 Like on that note, what has surprised you the most building this?
Most surprising building Subframe. It's a good question. I think one of the hardest parts is really just striking the hold on, this is one I maybe need a minute for. Okay. Yeah, one of the most surprising things is actually around how designers interact with AI in their workflow.
Mm.
We were all there for last year, sort of the initial AI that Figma launched and then didn't launch and things like that. And, there's definitely conversation out there that is valid to bring up around like, oh, is AI taking our job? Is it replacing things? Right. And that's not just in product design, of course, right? That's across the board and in any creative field. But what's truly been surprising in a good way is how many designers really start to see that AI as a creative partner.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's some of the things we're doing where, again, you're always in that driver's seat. You can always visually control things. And maybe it's just sort of, these tools getting big enough or good enough and more widespread, but designers going in and actually spending the time to, get these AI generations and use it to either explore new ideas or even validate ones that they've already had. Sometimes you just want to ask, like,
Yeah.
design your own dashboard and then ask an AI to design the same dashboard. And if it does it kind of the same way, well, you're probably on the right path, at least for a baseline, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's been really cool because I think we have to embrace this. It's just another tool, another, thing that helps us actually be creative We
Yeah.
just need our tools to kind of enable that, right?
Yeah. So on that note, so let's say, look, I've got an hour, let's say maybe a week to learn about or start experimenting with new tools. For somebody that's picking up Subframe today, like what would they expect in the first hour?
Yeah. I mean, in the first, 3 minutes, you'll be able to really quickly create a theme for your UI. We give you just some things out of the box to make that easy. So again, I think that aspect of, hey, this feels like me, this is personal. It's kind of that IKEA effect of helping you. If you're the one kind of building that, you grow more attached to it. But you're able to start with a prompt with that context. You'll get a page there. We have a feature that is in beta right now, but it lets you essentially annotate your design to add functionality to it. So it's another visual way of prompting where you might just click on a search box and say, hey, allow me to type in here and search the whole list of, items below. And we'll actually build that right under the hood. And then you have the code. Again, you don't have to wait for the code to come around. It's all generated on the fly. And from there, it's really up to you of where are you handing this off, quote unquote, right? We have export options to tools like Bolt and Replit that will let you take that and take that front end. And if you want to actually hook it up to a back end authentication, make it a real app, you could do it there. Or you could just take that code to your code editor, like Cursor, like Windsurf, or your friendly human engineer, and have them build that there. But I would say, yeah, getting started, of course, there's complexity under the hood, full flexibility to tweak and customize and learn all the things around components and variants and slots that is familiar with design tools and getting into the nitty gritty. But yeah, we try to make that initial experience of I have something that actually matches
Yeah.
what I'm looking to do kind of immediately,
Yeah.
and some explorations on the side at the same time. That is the, first 2-3 minute experience.
Yeah. Flipping that maybe into larger organizations, I think maybe a couple of weeks ago, by the time this is released, maybe it'll be last month, the CEO of Shopify said every team should be experimenting with AI. So, or AI tooling. And so what would be the pitch for somebody working in maybe a larger organization of starting to adopt a tool like this?
Yeah, we've been hearing getting a lot of demand, I think, whether it's internally from these companies that are just kind of top down, or sometimes it is still, bottoms up of people just experimenting.
Yeah.
Um, for bigger companies, we want to make sure that the experience you get out of Subframe is as close to the experience you have working on your real product as possible. And so that means, yes, working with us on, hey, if you have design system components, if you have brand guidelines, if you have certain code, patterns that you use, we could get that in for you. And we could basically train this like personalized AI to um, help you design across functions, right? PMs and designers alongside there. But in general, I would just say, really try to kind of embrace a bit of the chaos right now.
Mm.
I don't think anyone has figured out what an ideal process looks like. We're in these early stages of being like, the tide has shifted. These current silos and workflows are right, maybe slowing us down. And I think just being open to experimentation, to kind of the curiosity there, and flipping that mind that, hey, being agile just as a company, right? That no one tool is gonna solve everything, and no one process is gonna guarantee you success every time. It's kind of, I think, a little bit taking a little, that kind of what I'm used to in early stage scrappy, how we build Subframe, which is like, I don't know, but I'm gonna try it. And
Yeah.
you never, you have to experiment. And hopefully we just make it a bit easier to actually fit it into that workflow where an entire team can collaborate in one place.
Yeah. Well, Philip, thank you so much for sharing your journey, giving us a bit more insight into Subframe. We're really excited for what you have in store. Is there anything at least you can speak to? Are there any updates that are coming down the line in the in the immediate future that people can take advantage of?
Yeah, I would say our ability to import your existing design system components, we are starting to roll that out with larger companies who have those built out. So that's something if anyone is interested in, can definitely reach out to us about, and we'll work with you to set that up. And then yeah, we have something planned in the next few weeks around bringing in our sort of prototyping feature out of beta and really letting pretty much anyone start to build these interactive experience. So I would say it's all coming. It's all early. We build fast. We're a small team,
Yeah.
and I think just having feedback from people is exactly the thing that keeps us going and building the right thing.
Exciting stuff. Where can people find you?
Well, subframe.com is, of course, where you can find Subframe. I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter or X. So always willing to hop on calls too, especially, one of my favorite parts of the job is connecting with designers, with other builders, to really, again, collectively figure out what does this new process and world look like. So yeah, I'm open.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. That's a wrap for the show. Best of luck with everything, and looking forward to keeping up with all the things Subframe.
Thanks, Harrison. It was great to be here, and yeah, see you around.
Thanks for tuning in to Technically Speaking. If you liked today's episode, be sure to hit subscribe on Substack, YouTube, and you can give me a follow on LinkedIn. Links are in the show notes. See you next time.